since we don't have any earthquakes, hurricanes, tornadoes, it's really the only thing that keeps the riffraff out.
That's true. That is kind of funny. Florida's population does fluctuate based on how many hurricanes we have in a year. It's either net plus or minus. Well, I'm going to get started. I'm going to start the recording here. For everyone that hasn't been on the call, we record these guys and they go up on YouTube. I believe we are actually up to date on the YouTube channel. So there's two recent videos that if you missed were probably pretty exciting to see. One was Alexander Rademacher from the Lattes Project in Brazil, who's also with IBM Research. He did a great presentation on his work with the semantic web. And then we also had an talk from Violetta Ilk from Texas A&M, and he demonstrated ingesting data into VIVO using a tool developed by Stanford, I believe, called Karma, which is basically a visual mapping tool for mapping data from different ontologies and sources, which was pretty neat. So that's been what's going on recently. Today we're going to talk about, it doesn't say who's giving the talk in number 2, so I'll go and fix that. It was Mr. Ted Lawless. And Steve, is it V-E-N or P-H-E-N? Did I spell Steve's name wrong? I hope I did.
You got it right.
So they're going to talk about
That's
some work
right. He's.
Go ahead, Ted.
I was just saying Steve will join us in a second. He's setting up his audio.
So Ted, you have presenter, and as soon as you hit show my screen, we will be able to see what you see.
Okay. And where should I see that option?
There's a go to meeting control panel. Should be where the chat box is. It's up the top left.
Excuse me, Microsoft Excel.app needs your attention.
Oh, sorry, Microsoft Excel.
Okay, here we go. Sorry, a little slow here. Do you see my screen now, Chris?
Not yet. It might take a second. Yes, I do.
Hey, everybody. Steve, I'm here.
All right, Ted, you have the agenda open, and you also have a Gmail tab all the way to the left, and then I see...
Okay. I think we're good to go then.
We can see you.
So, Chris and I have talked a couple times, and I think Steve mentioned it a couple weeks ago on the VIVO implementation call. But here at Brown, we've developed a separate web application that faculty are using to edit some of the data that is in their public VIVO profiles. So Chris thought it'd be a good idea if we sort of went over some of the background information or motivation for doing this and how the application works. So we'll go ahead with that. Here at Brown, our VIVO instance is now public, beginning May 1st, and a majority of the data that will go into, or it is in that system, is coming from local systems of record. But there is some data that we want people to manually update, and we found that we needed sort of something custom for that, just to sort of satisfy the needs of the project. So we're gonna talk about that.
And to satisfy our faculty members and users as well. There is certainly some expectations on our end for how the structured data is going to work, but there was a lot of hue and cry the first time we rolled out VIVO, and our faculty members wanted something that was a little bit easier for them to use. Just want to add that.
And you guys wanted to have a custom workflow
And so
for editing,
a little
right?
bit more about.
I was saying, Ted, you guys wanted to have a custom workflow so your faculty members knew the step 1, step 2, step 3 of what you expected from them. So that was another reason, right?
Yes, and we wanted to make that sort of very straightforward. So just some quick background about our VIVO here at Brown. We have over 3,000 faculty, and includes all faculty at the university. So it's sort of in its early stages in this what we're calling our sort of phase 1 of a rollout process. And right now, its main purpose was to replace an existing research profile system that really was mainly textual descriptions of the research activity of the faculty. But moving forward, we're going to add structured publication data, perhaps grants, things like that.
But despite the sort of old-fashioned quality of the legacy system, as I was sort of hinting at before, our faculty, for whatever reason, was still very much enamored of this system. And so, again, we need to develop some facilities for enabling some of the old sort of editing that they had been used to.
So starting last summer, we started work on this web application that will serve as that is serving now as a place where faculty log in and update portions of their VIVO profile. And we wanted to build this in something we were familiar with so that we could move quickly in terms of responding to requests for new features or adjusting the application as needed. And we chose Django, a Python web framework. It's very mature, used at Washington Post, PBS, places like that. But we'll show you the application in a few minutes. But there's a lot of JavaScript there because we wanted to take advantage of sort of the rich JavaScript libraries that are being developed and provide that sort of user interaction that will make things a little easier for the end users. And maybe Steve can also mention some of the data modeling.
Yeah, sure. I can jump in a little bit. In terms, I think from my perspective, Django, for those of you who are unfamiliar with that, I mean, it's not something that I came in to Brown with a lot of familiarity with, but if you know Python, it's very easy to learn. And the system that Ted's developed is also very extensible, as he was sort of saying, with the data model. The Django is built on the sort of standard model view controller architecture, and that relies itself on the relational data model, which of course is not what VIVO and RDF is built on. But it can be fairly easily translated into that, and Ted's done a good amount of work for sort of putting Django into a RDF compatible, triple compatible read and write process. And so while it's not, Django isn't designed for writing this kind of data, it can easily be manipulated into doing so.
So that's sort of where we were coming from, and some of the challenges that we encountered or are encountering is we wanted to build a system that had really no need for end user training. So the workflow or the process is that faculty or their designated delegates log in via the campus single sign-on, which is Shibboleth, and they're redirected to their profile. And we wanted the information that we would like them to update needs to be front and center. This application's almost entirely a single page. So it's there's not a lot of clicking around to different portions of the web application.
Yeah, I'll say that when we did our first rollout, that was using the sort of native VIVO edit interface. It's very good for those of us who are familiar with VIVO and familiar with RDF data. But for a number of end users who, as Tara was saying, are coming in here without any training, with 10 years of sort of learned reflexes from using the standard web interfaces to databases, which are again relational data. They sort of, as Ted was saying, expect single pages. They expect more sort of intuitive form-like interface. And VIVO, if you're unfamiliar with editing data in VIVO, there is a lot of sort of clicking from page to page, going sort of drilling down through data, and it can be a little bit cumbersome. In addition to that, the speaking, Ted was talking about integrating outside JavaScript modules and sort of extensibility, but again, when we asked faculty to look at their pages and to start doing some editing, a lot of the requests that we got back had to do just sort of with changes to the display or changes to the labeling. So, people didn't want something called an academic article. They wanted it to be called a conference paper or a workshop paper or something like that. And we found that trying to make those updates in the native VIVO application was requiring a lot more manual revision of the code and getting sort of deep into the actual underlying logic of the system. And so, that was a major challenge that we faced, and the solution here was to go with something that was a little bit easier to update and quicker to incorporate those requests from our users.
Sort of another thing we ran into or are running into is that sort of technologies for working with RDF are changing rapidly. I have a list here at the end of different things we took a look at, particular JavaScript libraries for working with RDF, and many of them are sort of either undergoing a lot of development because they are new, or they were part of a project and development is stalled. So we reviewed a bunch of different JavaScript libraries, but didn't find any that we thought were a good choice for moving forward. So we went with some JavaScript libraries that are for the web generally, not specific to RDF. So an example of sort of the technology changing is while we were working on this, JSON LD, which on the surface seems like a good fit for this type of application, only became a W3C recommendation in January, and the Python library for working with it is still sort of catching up to the recommendation, so it's not really stable in terms of putting it into an application. We also, VIVO itself is changing with the release of 1.6. The Sparkle Update API makes a lot of what we would like to do in terms of editing VIVO data from an external web application much easier. But we had also already loaded up a lot of data into VIVO 1.5 and weren't quite ready to rework our data ingestion process or the display customizations that we've made. So that's sort of what we wanted to say about where we stand or where we stood when we started out on this, and now we'll actually talk a little more about what might be more interesting to people on this call, our platform. So what I mean by this is the Django application that we've developed for faculty to use. It's running alongside the VIVO web application. The VIVO web application is still our public-facing portion of our VIVO implementation. So we wanted to have a way to run another app alongside of it, and that is able to read and write data from it. We use, within this application, we use Fuseki for the Sparkle read queries. We use the VIVO Solar Index for staff searching and some of the autocomplete views that our forms have. I'll show you in a minute. We wrote some code that will write data back to VIVO, but we're very eager to replace that with the Sparkle Update API. We use Twitter Bootstrap for the HTML and CSS layout. That sort of allowed us to have a pretty good web layout and tools for adjusting that. We use a jQuery plugin called TOCify, as in table of contents, and this allows us to put a majority of the profile information we want faculty to update on one page and still allow sort of quick and easy navigation between sections of the profile. For rich text editing, we use an editor some of you might be familiar with, because I think it's kind of one of the standard WYSIWYG editors called the CK editor. And we also use a JavaScript library that we're very happy with, another jQuery plugin called Select2, and that is helpful for building autocomplete and tagging interfaces. And we're also using sort of the built-in, Django comes with a lot of functionality for building websites, and particularly we're using some of the form utilities for editing things like we have a CV uploader, a photo uploader, and web links. So some of the more complex data, we do use the Django form framework. Steve, do you have anything to add to that?
No, but I think that's definitely a solid overview. But I think the nice thing looking at that is just one of the benefits of this approach is to keep things a little bit more modular and to be able to leverage some of the work that goes on elsewhere, and let other people do the hard work of putting together interfaces and autocompletes for us.
So I guess we'll.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Are you guys storing some of this data in relational databases that you're using to then update VIVO, or is it all sort of in memory and coming out of the RDF directly or something?
So at the moment we're making sort of real-time writes to VIVO, so there is no relational database backing this at the moment. We're working on a publications sort of harvesting and approval process, and with that, I think because we want to sort of queue up publications, we will maybe use our sort of working development version does use a relational database for that. But what faculty are sort of using, what is our production editor at the moment, we don't store data in a relational database. It goes directly into VIVO.
Okay. And so that client that you have for writing back to VIVO, does it talk to the VIVO application before it goes into the database?
Yes.
Okay. And can sorry, but so does Python interoperate with Java, or how do they communicate?
So what we've done, and this is why we're very eager to go to the Sparkle Update API, is we're sort of treating some of the web form, I guess you call controllers in the VIVO web application as an API. So we make HTTP requests to insert the data.
Gotcha.
Okay.
and do some storing of sessions and things like that. So that's why we're very helpful or very eager to get the Sparkle Update API up and running here.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure it makes the upgrade also a little trickier. Or a lot trickier.
Yeah, we haven't planned that, in detail yet, other than, it's something we know we have to do or want to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same here.
Is there any other questions before we show a quick demo? Okay. So for this demo, I have a default VIVO 1.6. So for the demo, I'm actually going to use VIVO 1.6 on my machine. And it has just, I think, 3 people loaded into it and 2 organizations.
How's the performance holding up?
It works pretty well.
Good. That's good to hear.
No load balancing or anything like that. And what I'm going to show you the application is really a minimal version of what our faculty are currently using, and it's sort of what the core functionality of this app we've built up, and possibly if someone was interested in reusing our app, this would be kind of the starting point. And for the demo purposes, we're going to use the VIVO Sparkle Update API that's part of 1.6 to write the data back. So I'm going to switch screens. And does everybody see a VIVO page, home screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So this is the VIVO that we'll be working with. You can see the 3 people I've loaded up, and there's 2 organizations. And now I'm going to switch to the demo version of our application. And you can see this is coming, the view you're seeing here is just from the HTML5 boilerplate site. So we sort of just started out with a minimal HTML template just for demonstration purposes. And on this index screen, I have a list of the people in the organizations in the VIVO instance. And I'm going to click on one, Rosella Burks, and you can see if this were sort of running live, that when she logged in, she'd be directed to the screen, and these would be the 2 sort of VIVO profile data sections that we are asking her to update. We have the overview and research areas. And so for terms of updating, it's a click in the box, which in-place editing using, I guess, HTML5 standards and the CK editor. And users can just type in information here and click Save. And in the background, that posted the data to VIVO. And if I go back over to my VIVO instance, click on her, and I'm logged in. Let me log out. And you can see that my change was, previously it was I am a biologist, and then I added working at Brown University. So that sort of actually satisfies a large number of the requirements we had for our project. Is like I said, the existing system had a lot of background information, so people can add sort of introductions to sections of their profiles using this type of editor. Steve, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, I mean, I think you're rolling along. The research areas are very cool, though.
So for the research areas,
I have one question. So how you deal with the models? So are you try to edit and modify the KB2 model directly, or you choose to create a specific model to interact with? How you deal with that? I mean the general models, the
so
graphs
we are
inside it.
So that's a good question, and I meant to say that. But so when the user does this edit interaction and posts the update, a RDF add and remove graph is created. And so a Sparkle query does an insert and then a delete. Does that answer your question?
Well, not completely. So yeah, I understood that you do a delete and a insert, but again, you are using how you organize the GENA models. You choose to work with one model, a separate model, or you choose to work directly with the KB2 model. That's a default model that Vivo put all the instance data that people edit in the web interface.
Right. So we are using the KB2 model. I
I
think
see.
you bring up a good point because for terms of provenance and things like that, it might be better to use a different model for this type of activity.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
in
maybe,
Vivo
yeah.
1.5, we were only able to write to the KB2 model kind of using the method we're using. But in 1.6, you should be able to um, specify a different name graph, with this technique.
Exactly.
So for research areas, that's sort of one of the areas of our Vivo implementation at Brown that we have some structured data in terms of um, faculty supplied topics, keywords about their activities. So we use the select2 library that I mentioned earlier to build an autocomplete sort of tagging kind of interface for that. And right now for the demo, I'm not querying. In our live instance, we query Vivo via Solr to look up new terms. For this demo, I'm actually using um, FAST, a service from OCLC that has topics that come from library authority records. So when I type in here, I'm going to begin typing a keyword, and then I'm offered the FAST suggestion. So I'm going to choose plant biology and environmental policy, let's say. Both of these have been posted to Vivo as RDF. If I go back out to um, the Vivo profile, click refresh, we seem to have a problem here. Huh. So I see them here, but I don't see them in a public display. It might be something um, odd with the way we're constructing them. But you can see that
They're still
they
there.
were
That's pretty
posted.
impressive. That's awesome.
I can show you the live version, and if a faculty member comes in and clicks on remove, that actually submits a remove RDF request as well. Let's see here. So I'll try not to get sidetracked by why those aren't showing up. I wanted to show that the URIs that are created for these terms are actually URIs from FAST. So we're doing sort of linked data in that way, and it's transparent to the end users what they're actually, making these connections for us. So that is
that would be cool.
basically two reusable components. So
No, I was going to say that would be cool. Can you show us the URIs, or were they not in the?
Something must have
Well, it looks like
gone wrong.
it looks like they're in the admin interface.
Let's see if I can. Oh, I know why. It's because I'm posting them, I think, expecting Vivo 1.5 to be behind the scenes, and the ontology might be slightly different for this,
Ah.
since this is Vivo 1.6. And just to show sort of what we've developed in terms of extensibility in the back end here, I can show you we have this basically configuration system for specifying one of these edit areas on a profile screen. So you can see that the two that aren't commented out are Vivo Overview and Vivo Research Area. So let's say we had a need to add affiliations to the profile screen, which is actually something we have at the moment, but they're text and not URIs to organizations. So I would come in here as the application developer and basically activate this section. And you can see here that the predicate that's going to be created is actually not part of the Vivo ontology. So the editing work we're doing here there's nothing Vivo specific about the RDF that we're creating and removing with this editor. So it could work for other projects. So this section should be activated now on the faculty profile screen. And if I click refresh, you can see now I have a new organization or affiliated organizations area. And I could say that this person used to work at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and a URI is created for that organization if it doesn't exist already, and this person is linked via their affiliation. So that is sort of the part that we're excited about, is we have some flexibility to sort of add different sections using these two sort of basic widgets. In our live version, faculty can use this to add delegate editors. So it'll do a lookup to the campus directory and find people that maybe their administrative assistant that they want to have access to their profile, and they can add people that way. They can also add collaborators at Brown. So I work with this other faculty member using an editing widget like this. And I'll jump back to one more thing before take questions. So I'm going to click on a organization this time. So I clicked on this organization, American University, and just to show that the editing we did there wasn't specific to people entities either. It's sort of flexible enough to handle different types of resources. So I'm going to add some text. Click Save. It's been posted. And yeah, you can see my change was added there. So that is sort of where we stand. I could quickly show you a live version of this. This is our staging server, but this is what we have currently now that faculty are using. So it looks different. Looks like a Brown website. This view you're seeing here is only what managers of the application would see. But if I load a faculty profile here, this is more what, well, this is what the faculty see when they log into VIVO in terms of to edit. So this is their profile editor. They use this table of contents widget to sort of browse through the sections. They have the ability to change their photo, look at their CV and change their CV. This is the collaborators area that I was talking about. So they can look up a name of a colleague and add that colleague as a collaborator, and the research areas as well. So that's our application. That's what we've been working on in terms of managing some of the VIVO data that doesn't come from a local system of record, and using this faculty member as an example. You can see that we have departmental affiliations, which are their appointments. Those are coming from a system of record. Doesn't look like this person teaches any classes, but we are pulling classes from a system of record. Degree information is coming from a local system of record, so we're able to browse universities by the faculty members that have attended them. But the data that's not coming from those systems of record is being managed with this application. So any questions? Steve, any comments?
No, not really. I mean, I think just that as your future work thing says, I mean, we're using your editor now to support a lot of legacy data, but we're hoping to slowly sort of phase that out and have less and less text areas and more structured data. But the Django editor should be able to handle that.
Hey, how many users do you have using?
I think it'd be very helpful to have this transition.
Go ahead, John.
I just going to say, I think it could be very helpful to have, given that you have a lot of legacy data. We have some of the same problem at Cornell, where we have for our arts college, which doesn't use the Activity Insight faculty reporting tool. We're still getting publications as one big block of text that they very carefully formatted exactly the way they want it to be presented, and that means that we can't do co-author visualizations with them or anything, but it's kind of the only way we can get the data at the moment. And sometimes you just have to live with issues like that and gradually transition people. So this seems like it gives you a lot of flexibility.
We have that same problem, John, or we think of it as a problem, where we have a section that we sort of reluctantly added called scholarly works, which is a big block of text that's sort of the bibliography section of someone's CV. And this summer, July 1st, I guess, is the sort of tentative deadline. We're hoping to roll out structured publications with our faculty in the Division of Biology and Medicine. So I'll be very interested to see how we coordinate, moving from that big block of text to structured publications, and how well that's received. And it might be something that department by department or school by school wants to handle slightly differently. So again, the flexibility is helpful. And Chris, I think, asked about how many people have logged in and used this. And I had that written down to look up before I gave this presentation and forgot. Last I checked a week or two ago, it was over 300. So it is getting a fair amount of use. I would say in the neighborhood of maybe 10 profiles a day, someone updates.
Have you had any? You brought up the provenance issue earlier. And I noticed that when the manager would log in, you would see the last 50 profiles that have been edited. Do you have more need for provenance than that I know that Duke and their supplemental editor, Patrick, maybe you can confirm this. I think it's possible to go back and from the person's profile see the last time that any field was changed and who did it. Are you trying to store that at all anywhere, or since you're writing just triples directly to VIVO, is that kind of lost?
It is lost at the moment, or we're not tracking that, and we haven't had feature requests for that, but I can see how or why that would be important. And we're working on the publications piece where there'll be a process where we show a list of publications that we've harvested, and the faculty can say yes or no. And with that, I think we're going to have a greater need to sort of store the interaction more. But I'd be interested to hear how Duke has implemented that.
Yeah, so we have the log of recent edits. It's not complete in the sense that we couldn't replay interactions just based on that log. But since we store any data that the users are able to edit, goes into a database that's outside of VIVO, and so we can always replay the ingest process from there. And I guess in terms of provenance, we don't do it. We sort of have different named graphs by publication or authorship and things like that. And I think what we found it to be most helpful for is when we find bugs in like our ingest process, or we want to put things in a little bit differently, or we weren't capitalizing a certain field that we want to capitalize and things like that. I think that's where we found the replayability most helpful. But yeah.
Another thing that's come up at Cornell for a while, we were, maybe, almost 10 years ago, asked about using VIVO for faculty reporting, and there was a very strong requirement there to know what was somebody's research overview and what research keywords did they have at some particular time period. So what was different last year from this year? There was a sort of a perception that faculty were listing things over and over again and calling it new work, and they really wanted to be able to go back and look at what had been said last year. So they not only needed to have provenance about when something was edited, but they needed to know the previous several versions of the same data element, which began to feel pretty incompatible with VIVO's underlying structure. So, but it sounds like you haven't had that.
We haven't
need.
heard.
Go ahead.
No, we haven't. And I'm remembering as we were talking about this, we do have a log file that does track all of this now that I'm thinking about the back end. So, but in terms of doing something, capturing a point in time, we haven't heard that use case, but I could, from my own curiosity, as people are starting to update their profiles, I sort of want to know, what they have updated. It seems like adding new collaborators from Brown seems to be a pretty popular topic. So, for reporting purposes, there's all sorts of, things like that could be useful to, some stakeholders.
Can you show us some of the secret?
Well, you could also do it by. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, if before we run out of time, can you show us some of the secret sauce? Can you show us where you're making the call to the API and how did that work out? Was it hard? Was it easy?
Sure. Let me pull that up. So we're using, I didn't mention this, RDF lib, which is a Python, the sort of main Python library for working with RDF, and that we find works well for us. The call to the actual update API is somewhere here. So that actually, since the VIVO group based the update API on the W3C standard, that's actually really straightforward. So you can see that this VIVO 1.6 backend will receive a method will be called add and remove, and there'll be two graphs, the add graph and the subtract graph, and it sort of takes the the Python object and creates a Sparkle query from that, and then issues the HTTP post command with the username and password that is required by VIVO, and that's sort of it for the. So all of our edit operations operate under the assumption that there's going to be an add and remove graph.
Very cool. Thank you. Do you have any other questions for Ted? Other than what are your plans for sharing this?
So we're working on that. If you are interested in this, I guess anybody other than Chris, because I know he's interested, send me an email. I don't think it's going to be a problem. Up until recently, I thought the code was too specific to what we're trying to do, but we did make some efforts to modularize it so that it could be useful to other Vivo sites. So that's on our list of sort of future work. Collaborate, make the code reusable as possible, so we can still meet our local deadlines, but also perhaps share some code so that other people can build on it.
How do other people feel? Do other people feel like they'd like to see this?
I'd be really interested in seeing it, especially, I mean, seeing what you did there for 1.6. That's going to be really helpful for us at Duke. How just to see how you're doing the Sparkle update.
We have a project here at Cornell that's taking our entire library catalog and maybe more information. So it's and putting it and converting it to triples. And at this point, it's too much data to go into to VIVO. It's like at least 100 times as big as what we currently have in our Cornell VIVO. So this editing interface might be very interesting to use against a triple store directly, through a Sparkle API, and so that we might be able to build an editing interface for sort of parts of the triples where we could selectively read out parts of the information rather than having to spin up, try to get VIVO or Vitro to run with that big a data model.
And I think, and I'll share some of these notes because I did spend quite a bit of time looking at sort of related technologies. And from my perspective, since when I started working on this, I already had a fair amount of experience working with Python and RDF. So from my perspective, this is more of a sort of a JavaScript application. Well, it's basically JavaScript plus Sparkle queries. So even if you are a Ruby programmer or PHP or whatever, I think if we could talk a little bit more in detail, maybe on future calls about building editing interfaces for data that we want to store as RDF, that would be helpful too.
Well, Alexander said he had to leave, but he wanted to be on the presentation. But yes, this is being recorded.
Yeah, I'm back. Yeah, I'm back, Chris. I had to leave for a while, but I'm back. And actually, I have one last question. So, as far as I understood, the Vitro is supposed to be a general triple store editor, right? So a customizable and general editor for triples. So in some sense, the idea of developing this different platform means that Vitro somehow didn't help as expected. Am I right in this conclusion or not? What have you tried to customize to generate new themes for Vitro?
So I guess I could just answer a bit from my perspective. We did a little work with customizing forms in Vivo and using Vitro. And in our group, we're not Java programmers. We're working with a tight deadline, so we wanted something that we knew we could adjust quickly and react to quickly. And I mean, partially because of our own sort of skills and background, we weren't able to do that with Vitro. Vitro also does a lot of things that I don't expect this application ever to do in terms of being an ontology editor. It builds a solar index of all your triples. So it does a lot of sort of background work that we don't have plans to build into this application. So I see it more as sort of a complement, and that Vitro is still very good for managing our ontologies and the data, the underlying data, but this is more of a user-facing application.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
our experience at Cornell is that Vitro is really, I mean, I think Ted kind of hit it on the head that you know, Vitro and VIVO are both good for editing if you basically want the structure of the RDF, which is very interlinked and very, you know, you're adding relationships between different entities, and when your users don't think of that structure, don't think of what they want to enter in terms of that structure at all, when that structure is not natural to them, and you're really trying to kind of flatten it and present it to them in a very different way, you can do that inside VIVO or Vitro, and we've done that with some custom forms, but it can get kind of arduous, and it may, I mean, this kind of approach where you can take a certain set of data that you know you want to edit and do kind of a customized editing presentation that may be very different from the user perspective from the underlying structure. You know, if you told a faculty member that a publication was going to be stored as X number of authorships plus a journal plus a you know, the publication itself plus some date time interval you know, objects, I mean, they just think you were nuts. You know, they think of it as a citation, and if you can present a much cleaner interface for editing in another tool and then save the structured data into VIVO, that may turn out to be a lot less work in some cases. Where VIVO is good is that you can do that kind of, you can do editing that's reasonably functional without doing any coding at all by just changing the ontology. So it's very nice to build out prototypes and to sort of explore different structures and test how they populating them and so forth. But as soon as you want a really customized interface, something like this seems like might be a lot easier to do.
If I can throw in a different perspective to that.
Your analysis.
Yeah, just a different perspective, Alexander. I tend to agree that you know, while everything John says is certainly true, we also did try to add this capability to create these custom entry forms so that people could do their editing without having to know the structure of the data, the structure of the triples that they were inserting. And I think that you know, if we had greater resources, that would be one of my priorities, would be to make it easier for someone like Ted to create those custom forms, because right now it's not particularly easy.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the point. I mean, as Ted told, the main point that they support their decision was about how easy it was to adapt it, to adjust the interface. So I feel the same. Sometimes it's very hard to understand the whole thing, and better to start from scratch on a new tool, just because it's easier to develop a simple one that you have complete control and don't miss so much time trying to understand the other tool. So the whole point about how clean is the stuff and how the maintainability of the stuff. So yeah.
Well, I do think we're at a point now, and perhaps for a while into the future, where our resources are just not going to be devoted to that. Where we're pushing hard on the API and making it easier and more thorough for people to use VIVO as that back end. I would love to, again, put some more work into the application itself and into the ability to customize it more easily. But I don't know how many people are seeing that as a priority.
Well, I think that if you work on,
please don't judge me. I'm not saying that you have. Just to complete, I'm not saying that that was a mistake or is anything wrong. I'm just saying that I think in general it happens all kind of tools. So and this is kind of that's something that I'm quite interested on. Why we have always this sensation that's better to start from scratch a new tool that we have complete control and not spend some time trying to understand all the tools. So it's not something that happened only with VIVO, right? So I saw this happen with a lot of different tools and a lot of different applications.
well, I think the value of VIVO is always going to be its ontology and its rules and mappings and things that are what I consider business logic, which should be in the model layer and the controller layer that we don't want to. No one wants to build that. We want expertise working on that and experience, but the view and the presentation layer is always something that is people are going to have different opinions on, or workflow is going to be different. So I think Jim, it's a good thing that you have time, that you're going to devote your effort to working on kind of the logic model layer, because that's where the expertise is going to bear fruit.
Well, that's our thinking also at this time.
Well, it's 2:01:41, and I don't know we might have time for one more question. And I just want to formally thank Ted and Stephen for putting this presentation together. I've been trying to get them to show it for a while. They didn't think other people would be interested, and I said people are going to be very interested. This is some pretty fantastic work that you've done, and as usual, Stephen and Ted have done a fantastic job. Thank you for putting together all the notes. I've done a horrible job of taking the notes for the apps and tools, but I'll get together with Ted and get the notes that he's created for the talk up on the Duraspace site. So thank you again, Stephen and Ted.
Yeah, thank you. That was great.
And thanks for getting. And if you're interested, I'll try to get my notes into the wiki or somewhere where people can see them, and send me an email if you want to talk in detail about any of these components.
Yeah, it looks like you had a whole write-up there that would be very nice to add to the wiki.
Okay.
Jim, do you have a place where you want this kind of thing to go? I guess under apps and tools. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so.
Well, thanks everyone for attending. And again, the next call will be in 2 weeks. So that'll be May 27th. And we'll be really excited. We don't have a presenter for May 27th yet. However, we have a few people who are trying to twist their arm. So, guys from Duke, if you're interested in showing anything, we'd love to have you. Hint, hint, wink, wink, nod, nod. But anyway, thanks everyone for coming to the call, and I really appreciate it. And you'll see this recording up on YouTube probably by the end of the day tomorrow. All right, take care. Thanks. Have a great day.
Okay.
Bye,
Bye.
everybody.